at the University of Chicago. This important conversation is being brought to you by International House at the University of Chicago, Women in Public Policy, a student group at the Harris School of Public Policy here at the university, and One Shared World. Before we jump into the content for today's program, let me share a little bit about International House and One Shared World. From the day the first International House in New York opened its doors 100 years ago, with Berkeley, Chicago, and London to follow, we've been dedicated to the promotion of understanding and fellowship among the peoples of all nations. Through our programming and communities, we work to promote cross-cultural understanding, mutual respect, and friendship among international students, scholars, and the global community. That mission is made manifest through programs like today's, and that mission guides the work of the 15 other international houses around the world. While One Shared World is 96 years younger than the oldest of the international houses, its mission is in fundamental alignment with iHouses. One Shared World was founded in the early days of the pandemic as a community of thousands of people from around the world coming together to address the mismatch between the global challenges we face and the predominantly national way that we organize to address them. These challenges are broader than deadly pathogens. They include climate change, ecosystem destruction, weapons of mass destruction, and global underdevelopment. The virus made it clear that we are interdependent. Each person's security and well-being resides in every other person and in our common ecosystem, and we must work together and help each other. That help is not charity. It is one of the best investments we can make in helping ourselves. To learn more about the work of iHouses and One Shared World, please check out our websites that you will find scrolling on screen and dropped into the chat throughout the program. Now to our program. We're very excited to welcome today Professor Aruna Roy, Professor Naveen Kumar, and I want to remind everybody that following the conversation between Professor Roy and Professor Kumar, there will be a Q&A part to this program, so please drop your questions in the chat throughout the program. Now I want to turn the floor over to Vartika Singh, one of our fantastic International House fellows and interns, to introduce herself and to introduce our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm Vartika. I'm an iHouse fellow and an intern. I also represent Women in Public Policy, which is a Harris student organization. And I'm presently pursuing MA in Public Policy from University of Chicago. I've had a profound career of 14 years in India in the public finance and banking sector. And without further ado, let me begin by introducing our moderator for today's conversation. Naveen Kumar is an assistant instructional professor at the Harris School of Public Policy, University of Chicago. He was raised in Mumbai and educated at the Delhi School of Economics before getting his PhD at Boston College. He works in crime and public policy, but has extensive training in the economics of development. Moving on, our guest speaker for today is Professor Aruna Roy. She is a socio-political activist and co-founder of the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, MKSS, and of the School for Democracy. She was in the Indian Administrative Service from 1968 to 1975 and resigned to work with the marginalized and underprivileged in rural Rajasthan. She is President Emeritus of National Federation of Indian Women. As member of the National Advisory Council, she played a crucial role in the passage of national legislations for the right to information and the right to employment law under Manrega in 2005. She published a book chronicling the history of the right to information movement in India titled The RTI Story. And recently, in 2024, she published her memoir, The Personal is Political. She was awarded the Raman Magsaysay Award in 2000, Nani Palkiwala Award, and the Lal Bahadur Shastri National Award for Excellence in Public Administration, Academia, and Management in 2010, and listed as one of the 100 most influential people in the world by the Time magazine in 2011. In 2017, the Times of India listed her as one of the 11 human rights activists whose life mission is to provide others with a dignified life. She was also named among BBC's 100 Women of the Year 2024. and the list goes on and on and on. So let us begin the conversation. Over to you, Professor Naveen.
Thank you, Vartika. Thank you, Michael. Hi, Aruna.
Hi, hello, Naveen.
So I wanted to start with a question you've probably gotten asked a lot, but for the benefit of our viewers. So for those of you who don't know, the Indian Administrative Services is India's civil service. It is very difficult to get into. About 500,000 people take the exam, 800 people clear. And Professor Roy was one of those very few people, and at the time, one of the very few women who had done so. So it's difficult. It's also extremely prestigious. It's a position. It leads to you being placed in positions of power.
If I change,
and
it will be problematic.
So the first question I have, Professor Roy, is, and you've probably heard this a lot, but why did you leave? Was there some event that caused you to leave, or was it just like a slow disillusionment, or something else, some other priority came up?
You know, this question is the bane of my life, because everywhere I go, it's almost always the first question that's asked. But let me tell you that power to do good is also the power to do evil. The power to do good is also the power not to do anything at all. And I think in the civil service, the 7 years that I spent with a lot of idealism made me realize that power is also a career. For many people, the civil service is a career to accumulate more power. Power itself is a very separate and huge issue that sometimes we should all discuss. And actually, what is power? Where does it reside? And in a democracy, what is the power of the individual, if the people, the poor, who all have a vote, who are given all kinds of assurances, but never seem to see the light of day? If I'd stayed on in the service, it would have been infighting, probably not leading anywhere. So I just decided that I'll leave the service. And leaving the service for another job made no sense to me, because they were all in the larger paradigm of accepting power related to money, to status, and defining worth with money and with privileges. And I wanted to live a life where I worked with the less privileged and wanted to see India through their eyes. So it made no sense. So I left it and went to rural Rajasthan and began a new life, which has been very fulfilling, very exciting, and in many ways made my life worth it. So I think it was a good choice. And as a woman, even in the civil service, I had to contest and contend with male patriarchy, all kinds of issues. So it's not as if for a woman, if you step into conventional path, it's an easy path. It isn't either. So for many reasons, my life thereafter has been looking at how we can distribute power, we can access power, and realize the constitutional values that have been given to us since 1950 by the Constitution of India, chaired by Dr. Ambedkar and many others, and also reach the last person Gandhi had so much talked about.
Thank you. I absolutely agree that it was good for many, many people that you left. After you left, you joined the Barefoot College, and a couple of years after that, you created the MKSS. So can you just describe to us briefly what prompted you to do that and what the MKSS represents? So what does it do? What does it stand for?
Okay, very briefly, and because we have very little time, I'm going to go into the briefest of descriptions. Because Mahatma Gandhi, when he talked of public action, used 3 words. He used seva, which is service. He used nirman, which is creative work or development. And the third word he used was struggle. He said all these 3 aspects of public work which have equal value. So if you look at my life, the IAS was service. It's called the Indian Administrative Service. Then when I went to Barefoot College, it was understanding about development and also going through a very rigorous process of deschooling myself, because I lived without drinking water, being piped, without all those facilities. And I was just treated as one other human being by all the multitude of women and men. They had no respect for my status or my literary skills or my literacy skills or nothing. And I landed there and I realized what it was to be a common Indian. I also unlearned many of the preconceptions we had. We always go in thinking we have to give something. I'm afraid that is a completely screwed up idea. You go there to learn giving and taking, more taking than giving actually. And because I've been able to write books and think it's so much because of what they gain in terms of learning. And we are equally intelligent people. Only one group has had all opportunities and the other has had none for the literate world. But in terms of thinking, they are very, very smart people. And I learned a lot from them.
Yeah. And so that was your
So
experience with
from
the
there,
Barefoot
I went
College.
from having had the 9 years, I realized that it was important to say that now look, you prepare all these extremely good development plans, and ultimately the control over those development institutions such as the panchayat, institutions such as the elite in villages, who are very difficult to displace even today, caste elite, financial money elite. You have all these elite and they take over the power. So how do you establish your right for democratic power? So then Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan, or MKSS, was born out of an understanding that people have to look at democracy as participatory democracy, claim their share in making policy, in defining outreach programs, and exercising their voice in every step of the way, and to understand that their panchayat actually links to the national parliament and that they have a stake in the national parliament, in the local panchayat, in the state assembly, and in every step on the way. And that became the mission or the idea of the I don't know, objective or of the dream of the MKSS.
Right.
So we went there, and Nikhil, Shankar, and I were 3 people who went there, and we managed to get together hundreds of people, and we shared everything, and we created concepts. So the concept of right to information was not Aruna. It was not Nikhil, who's got studied in the US, or Shankar, who's worked for years with various issues. It was the people who said, if we don't have transparency, our lives are ruined. So we need transparency. So for them, it was a simple truth. And that truth became a huge entitlement and a law which has benefited millions of people in India today. So that's the growth. They're based in possibilities of action because they don't want anything that doesn't work. It's also based on concepts that they understand as principles really of truth, if you like, which are beyond politics. So it was a wonderful experience, and we now belong, the Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan is a non-party political organization. We are not not member of any political party, but we are political activists because we feel democracy makes us all political. It gives us a vote and then demands that we exercise that vote, and in exercising the vote, we demand information, accountability, and delivery.
Right. So one part of your book that, as we're talking about accountability, that really struck out for me is Shankar going to the district office and taking down by pencil all the records of payment. So this was, if I recall correctly, payment for work done by the villagers, and they had been underpaid. And so Shankar goes down and takes down all the records by hand, by pencil, comes to everyone and recites aloud names of people who are dead but are inexplicably on the payroll. So that is, can you give us like other such examples of the MKSS working for that kind of transparency early in its career?
You see, when I went to Barefoot College, I met a woman called Northi. And Northi was a fantastic educator. She is my guru. She and I have grown old together. And in my encounter with her, I realized that they know what they want. It's just that they don't have access to it. When I went there, she said to me, look, I know what I want. Just get me to a position where I can make my comments and get heard. So she mobilized. I just had to tell her that we had something called the minimum wage. And she mobilized 500 women, broke the panchayat nexus. She changed the development organization. So all you need is information. Just information is huge power, and they are kept from it. So I realized that. So when Shankar and I, Nikhil, went there, we knew that it was one of the issues we should struggle for. We didn't have a concept of the Information Act, but we did absolutely know that information is withheld from people because it's power, and that it's important for all of us to understand that. Otherwise, we are not going to be able to fight, struggle in our area. So, and how do you get this information? So Shankar's father was a revenue official and who knew exactly where to go for what. So Shankar grew up in a rural area and he understood everything. So when we went to the National Academy of Administration to give lectures, and a person called Harsh Mandar and a person called N.K. Saxena, all of them got convinced that transparency was important for people to get what they said need in terms of delivery of government programs. There was a probationer there. A probationer is a person who's studying to become an IAS officer, a civil servant. And he happened to be posted in our area. So we went to him and said, look, you agreed with us in the academy. Now show us the records. So he was flummoxed. He said, I can't. So we said, you have to. It's then that Shankar went and copied all those records. And there was complete chaos because there were so many untruths in those statements. And when we went back to the people for verification. We asked them, is it true or not? Do you believe in this? Is it correct? And huge amounts of corruption came in. And as the end of it, we've had a public hearing, which we called a Jan Sunwai. And the Jan Sunwai was absolutely fantastic. And amazing kinds of corruption. And I'll tell you one thing that I think this is a book in which you have the details of the RTI, all the various issues. And in Personalist Political, there may be a reference to one or two. And actually in a place called Janavati, it was absolute history in Rajasthan. They did more than 100 lakhs, which is 1 crore embezzlement. And they built a veterinary hospital on paper. When we went there, they said, when they got to know that we were doing the inquiry, they quickly built another veterinary hospital.
Sorry, Aruna, you're breaking up.
And that's hospital because the petrified being caught. I've never to get addressed, the ailments to be get addressed.
Sorry, Aruna, you're breaking
corruption.
up.
Need for.
You're back.
Did I disappear?
A little bit. Sorry, the last thing I heard was they built another veterinary hospital.
Yeah, they built the veterinary hospital upstairs on the first floor. I'm going to reconnect. You give me 1 minute. I think there's some problem with the connection. Can I just reconnect?
Of course.
Okay. But I'll keep talking while a friend of mine will try and reconnect. And the issue is... Oh God, that's too much now. I think just carry on. We'll waste time on that. Okay, all right. So just give me 2 minutes and I'm back. Airtel Khosla.
In the capital I.
So for the benefit of the audience, what we've been talking about is the importance of information to empowerment. So we have in India laws about minimum wage. We have laws about the government providing some amount of employment. And back in the 80s and 90s, when MKSS was getting started, they encountered a case where they had reason to believe, correctly, as it turned out, that laborers were not being paid their fair share. And so demanding government accounts of payments to these laborers really, and making that information public, made it possible for them to get what they were entitled to do so as a result of their work. Aruna, sorry, I was just catching people up.
Yeah, sure. You did a good job because you explained the reality of India. So what happened was that this great friend of ours was Dalit. Dalit means lower caste. with whom we practice untouchability and who are really the poorest of the poor and the most vulnerable in any village. But he was a poet. He was an illiterate poet. Created huge numbers of songs, beautiful verses. But he couldn't read or write. But he was a poet. These are the anomalies you must understand when you go and live in any rural community anywhere in the world. I think that they have the mind of an intellectual. They have capacity of. They have the enormous thinking capacity of a philosopher, but it's only that they do not have the written word, and we dismiss them. And it's just a terrible act that we do, because literacy is not education. That's one fundamental concept that we've all got with us. So, though this, our great friend, he created this beautiful song, and that song said, in 2 lines, because we had no social media then. The song went viral after all these public hearings. He said, these are all chores, they are thieves. And he said that the thieves of yore used to shoot us simply with a gun. The thieves of today kill us with their pen. So we have to get out the records. If you don't get out the records, we are all decimated and killed. So this extraordinary power of his poetry reached so many thousands of people, and the campaign grew rapidly. Also because of these public hearings, we kept taking out information and exposing the fraud and the corruption of people.
Yeah, so I'm reading the book. I'm struck by just how frequently song comes up in the book as a means of communicating to people, but also as a means of bonding people together. You talk about singing with people in the villages in Dunoli and in everywhere you go. So I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit about the role that song and perhaps more broadly art plays in activism and empowerment.
I'll just go back to my women now a bit, because after all, this whole discussion is mainly about, or partly about, women's mobilization. They have been my most important teachers. So, and they taught me some critically important things. The first thing is that communication is not just the word. It is through multiple ways. And we women understand that instinctively. Then somebody's crying, we just don't leave them alone and go off. We just go and put a hand around them. We want to know what's happened, what's upsetting you. It begins with those gestures. And they sing for everything in Rajasthan. They sing when they reap, they sing when they harvest, they sing for, when the rain doesn't come, they sing songs when the rain comes. So it comes naturally to them, and it's collective singing. It's not the kind of single singing that one voice is wonderful, so let's hear to it, there's an audience. Not that kind of singing at all. It's collective singing, everybody taking part in it, everyone feeling energized in it. So in that community of people who sing for everything, it was but natural that our message should seek out songs. So it's these songs that we sought out, and there were many very beautiful songs that we sang. I can't sing them now because we don't have time, but these wonderful songs, and the best communicators, in fact, even more powerful than your social media many times, because they invoke the emotion in a personal manner, but most of them are not there to provoke your anger or your hatred. Most of them are to provoke your emotion, but to take you to some place where you can act more. So songs are important, as are slogans.
Mm-hmm. So speaking on the women you've met during your work, so you've talked about how there are differences between what they're concerned with and perhaps the global feminist discourse more broadly, for the want of a better term. And so I was wondering if you could sort of speak to that, about the gap between sort of the opinions and lives of the women that you met on a day-to-day by day basis and the discourse more broadly, and how to bridge that gap. So
women, we are. Yeah, I'll give you an example. We are holistic creatures. We just don't think of. And I think one of the big, in my time, feminism was very bothered about how we are so fragmented. We think of ourselves as a human being. Oh, there's a stereotype you fight with because you're not shaped in the proper manner. You're not the right color. You can't wear the right dress. You can't do this and you can't do that. And you must fit yourself to fit the male perception of yourself. Apart from that, even in work, you have to fight to claim your right as a woman to decide multiple things. So when you work with women, you work everywhere. You just don't say, I've come to work for wages, that's it, and I'm going home. It can't be, Because the moment you talk about the wage, like I talked with Northi, I just had to tell her there is a minimum wage. And Northi, a Dalit woman, fantastic woman. She's still my friend. She's very old. She's as old as I am. Not very old I don't think I'm very old, though I'm going to be 79 this year. Nevertheless, the two of us are still fighting and still struggling for various things. She became the Sarpanch. She got many awards. Subsequently, she became computer literate. She's an amazing woman from zero, no literacy at all. So Northi, when I first introduced her to the concept of the wage, she organized people and fought for wages and went to the Supreme Court and won her case. And because of her, the whole of Rajasthan, the minimum wage was secured under a specific act called the Famine Relief Code. Certain sections were struck off. So, from being a woman, she was able to impact legal tools. Sushila, another woman, who went with us when we presented the Right to Information law in Delhi, which is the capital of India, to people, all members of the editors of newspapers, ex-prime ministers, etc. We presented a copy of the draft bill. And one reporter asked her, he said, "How much have you studied?" So she said, I've passed my 4th grade. So he said, "What can you do?" 4th grade? Rubbish, yeah, ex-prime ministers fighting for it, editors fighting for it. What will you do? And she turned around and said to him, "When my son goes to the marketplace, with 10 rupees I give him. When he comes back, I ask for accounts. This government spends billions of rupees in my name. I'm going to ask for my accounts." So she came out with the first slogan, "Our money, our accounts." Fantastic slogan, which was translated into all the Indian languages. And in those 4 words, she defined the RTI. Subsequently, just one second. Subsequently, when we went through the RTI and we had got the law, the UN the UN women at that time called women, decided to release their biannual report. And whom do you think they called? Northi. They went to New York to release the biannual report in front of Ban Ki-moon, and they have the most crazy, funny stories they've come back with about how they were tutored to say something. And since they can't be part of a tutoring, they said it the other way around every time, and the organizers went crazy because the same things were said but the language was different, the idiom was the same. They went mad. So, so these 2 women reached New York and were the symbols of democratic women's power, of the ability to pass rights-based laws in Parliament, the concept, being able to give concepts very clearly, which became sections of the law, how they were in fact so critically important. So it's the song, it's the slogan, it's the thought, it's the idea, it's the ability to think positively of village development, and also to think of what they had to counter in terms of opposition from powers that are very, very difficult to handle in India. And they did it all. So it's for us one of the lessons in our lives that you can actually do it. But how do you do it? Unless you give them respect and equality, it can never be done. So the personal is indeed political for us. And in fact, it's extremely important that we understand that our life is a revolution. The second very important women's slogan, that it's a revolution doesn't lie elsewhere. It begins where you are. And that has been absorbed and completely understood by the women I work with, and a great sense of equality, because they see me as one of them. And for them, I'm not bigger or larger than them. I'm one of them. They see my role and they make sure that I fulfill that role for them.
So I'm curious, what is your role in all this as opposed to their role or is there a distinction?
Yeah, I do have a role, and my role is that of an amplifier. Also as a person who can understand and relate their experience to some kind of theoretical structure, understand the words that they'll have to use to make their position more quickly understood by the powers that be. Also to educate them. I also have an educational role about what is modern parliament, what is the modern role of political parties, why do you vote for them, what is each political party's social, economic and political agenda. I play an important role. Also because I go with them in support so that the ones who are privileged will give them more space to talk. So I create the space so that they can articulate. It's a very important role. And that's why we are now being, the present government and every past government as well, but the present government as well, doesn't like us because we are the ones who facilitate them to talk truth to power. And they are not then one bit overpowered by status. So they go and speak to people in power just as they would speak to their neighbor, and they can't take it. So this what they see as subservient, subjects suddenly become citizens, and they just cannot take it. But that little gap of facilitation is done by people like us who know the city better.
Right. Well, congratulations on being hated by everyone. I think that's a good sign of success if you're doing any amount of activism. So I was wondering if you could speak more about the RTI and how it was shaped, how it became what it became. You've spoken briefly on Northeast's role in this, but I was wondering if you could talk about it. For the benefit of our audience, the Right to Information Act in India think about the Freedom of Information Act in the United States. So this is a guarantee that citizens have access to information that is being generated, access to government records. And it was created, it previously didn't exist. And from my understanding, previously secrecy was the norm until all of this fighting resulted in transparency in government. And so I was wondering if you could speak to how that was shaped, both by...
Sure. The right to information was actually, it began, like I said, with Sushila and Northi, people asking for their wages and asking for simple things like that. But very soon, numbers of different groups joined, and they felt that it was a universal demand. Because the doctors wanted information, the women wanted information, the Dalits wanted information, researchers wanted information, even government servants wanted information. And even corporate bodies wanted information. So it became a national issue through two things. I mean, what is the strategy we use? First and basically, and the most important, is the struggle. Because without the struggle, you don't define what is absolutely the principles on which you want to fight. So the struggle defines the principles, and it has the guts to take it to the street. And we say the struggle takes it to the street, because the street is our parliament, the street is our policy room, the street is our studio, because from there we dispense information. But after the struggle, what? You realize that you need a campaign that will take up these issues and take it to every part of India, because we're a huge country, and also make it a part of a legal demand, which rural poor cannot do. So while they define the essential non-negotiables of the law, they can't write down or do a part of the law, a section, that is impossible for them. So the entitlement in terms of law and its legalese requires a special group. So we went from the village to the Press Council of India, which was with Justice Sawant as the chair, through the national media joining us. So the national media joined us in our struggle. So all the journalists were part of the struggle. They don't only merely reported on it. So they said, this is our issue. So we want to go and we want to join the struggle. So they did. And in having done that, they took the issue to, every space that we had. And then we did a long yatra, which is so typical of India. We did this yatra. We went from place to place, from state to state, meeting people who were interested, journalists, some were lawyers, some were students, some were campaigners like the National Federation of Indian Women, of which I was the chair at that time. All the women got involved in hundreds of thousands. So we went running all over the country, staging small protests, and then the campaign became large and it became a movement. Then after that, I didn't know how it engineered itself. It became automatic engineering. So when we sat and demanded the law, it was a huge part of the political debate of India. No political party could ignore this demand, because we said corruption and misgovernance is because of lack of transparency. So if you do not give us transparency, you're all corrupt. So the one thing that you will have to do is give us transparency. So every political party was caught at the cleft end of a stick. If it didn't give transparency, we would say that it's a corrupt party. Now, if they gave it to us, then they were terrified of what would come out. But eventually, what did happen was our law, it's a long history, I won't go through it. The states passed the law first. The national law, there was a very bad law passed in 2000 by the previous governments. And then the UPA came, the United Progressive Alliance, got to power in 2004. And when we demanded a very good law, they guaranteed the good law, and they brought out a promise to the people called the National Common Minimum Program. It is a piece of paper which I think should have marked India's progress into a more liberal and a more ethical and a bigger democracy forever. But it didn't. For only a short while it prevailed. So we took that piece of paper. At first thing it said that it will give us rural employment guarantee, which was another demand of ours. It also said it will give us a better law. And then they set up the National Advisory Council under the chairmanship of Sonia Gandhi. At that time, she didn't take prime ministership. So she became the chair, and just to implement the National Common Minimum Program, which was all welfare activities, mostly. Now those welfare activities are feminist issues. When I was in the IAS, the males always wanted defense, they wanted home, where the police is controlled, they wanted commerce, they wanted technology, and the women's ministries were what? Health, education, social welfare. So in a sense, there is this totally patriarchal division, even of jobs within government. So as women, we exercised our power for the first time in independent India, getting those rights-based laws, which meant attending to welfare, attending to health, attending to schooling, education, women's equality, violence in domestic areas, which was all kinds of things. We went to forest rights, and we established that these soft issues are important. That's why I say that the rights-based legislations were actually feminist legislations. They were, in fact, they were issues, and therefore any of the rights-based laws that we talk about could not have been made with a man's movement. It had to be a mixed movement in which was a dominance of women at the lowest levels. Though, mind you, at the drafting of the law, there were very few women. There were more men than women, but the women controlled the non-negotiables with the other men in the rural areas. So I think I call it a feminist perspective, where welfare and well-being and peace become more important than fighting your neighbor and financing your defense and getting a bigger chunk of the financial budget for the defense. You talk about at least a small proportional budget for welfare, for work, for all the various things which are important for the woman in her life and for the country, in fact, very, very important. In some senses, I see that the biggest mistake the democratic world has done is that it's absorbed and almost in toto patriarchal values of governance. It doesn't see the feminist value of governance, and if any ruler sees that, then that ruler is considered weak, because that person looks at welfare, doesn't look at war, doesn't look at this and that, but gives preference to education or schooling. But we have historical evidence that it works in a state like Kerala in India, which did extraordinarily well because it looked at development indicators and not at progress within quotation marks. And we have countries everywhere in the world which have done very well because of this. And that, I feel, is a feminist point of view.
Yeah.
Frankly.
I agree. So first of all, thank you for that vivid example of the importance of coalition building and the importance of rhetoric. I had not thought about that, and so I appreciate that. I've also filed RTI requests, so I thank you for that as well, and thank you and the MKSS, not you personally, of course, but the collective MKSS.
Yes, thank you.
So to the audience, please get your questions in. We're about to start with audience questions soon. And so just for like a quick early question, so one of the audience members asks, can Professor Roy talk a bit more about her work at the global level and or how her work in India has impacted conversation and policy at the global level? So outside of India, what has been your experience?
Actually, I think, the first real international presence we had was with the Open Government Partnership, which opened up participation of civil society as well as governments as equals in looking for transparency in governments all over the world. And MKSS was in the steering committee of the first 3 years of the OGP, the Open Government Partnership. And I think in going there, we realized the various nuances of transparency that were preoccupying people all over the world, but there was uniform agreement that there must be transparency of all government functioning. Without that, we cease to be a democracy. And I think that value that came from all the countries, because at that time, the Eastern Bloc had asked for the right to freedom of expression, because that was what they were suppressed with. But all the other countries, including the US and others, we all knew that its democracy is no cakewalk. Once you get there, then there are manipulations, there's big money that comes in, corporations that misuse power. There are so many ways in which power is misused, including representative politics. So you needed a different kind of system which would look at the way in which political power could be impacted. So that's one. The second thing that we have given to the world today, the MKSS is given to the world today, and this is MKSS has given to the world today, and our campaign for right to information is given to the world today, is performance audit or social audit. In the first time that we had the records read out, which you read about when Shankar went and copied, we demanded 4 things. We demanded total transparency of all records of the Panchayat office. We demanded that there should be a public audit, which we call a social audit, because we wanted not the financial audit, was just papers. We wanted people to go and see whether actually that bridge had been built, that road had been built, the building had been built, because we were sitting in front of a building which was recorded complete, which had no roof and no windows and no doors. It was so blatant. So we felt that there should be social audit. And then we asked for that the money be sent back because it had gone. You can't say this village is developed because on paper you have, we actually need the road. So and we asked for public accountability and punishment for the individuals who had defrauded the money. These were the 4 demands. Now, out of this, social audit has really become an international phenomena. It has become part of our Manrega. The Manrega has absolutely put it in as a clause within its law. So all audit of Manrega funds must be done social audit, in which every citizen has a right to go and depose to say what is wrong with it and to produce evidence to say that the money has not come to us, it has been audited. This has been accepted right up to the Supreme Court of India, by the United Nations, by the World Bank, many other places, and in many countries of the world. Mexico, in Kenya, many other places, we've gone and conducted public audits, social audits. South Africa, Indonesia, countries which accepted that this was the only way to control and demand both transparency and accountability of the people. The other thing that we have seeded, a very good idea, for which I was called by the European Union and also by the US government at some times. And when I was teaching in McGill, the 2 ex-prime ministers asked me if I would go and live in British Columbia and work out a Manrega program for them. And I said, no, I don't think I can do that. You'll have to do it with your own people. Because Manrega has absolutely, extraordinarily, it has given how many million people? 150 million Indians get work. And it's people who are then raised above the poverty line, because these people use that money to pay back loans which are there. They also use the money for education, for their children. They've stopped migrating. Women have stopped migrating because of Narega. Extraordinary things. And when there was a meltdown in the whole world, our markets were thriving because of the money they spent in the local markets for food. So it's been an extraordinary thing, underreported in many ways, except that there are some very few very good economists who've been writing about it. But in any case, it's been one of India's greatest ideas and concepts given, where it's not a dole. Actually, you deliver for the money. In some ways, America has also seeded the idea that because after the Depression, many of your buildings were built by people who got money to build and construct. In Chicago, I saw something. Once I came to Illinois and I saw something which was built during the Depression. So I think, they use people and labor during the depression to give them food to build infrastructures. It's
Yeah.
a brilliant idea in India, I think, because we build infrastructure, we also contribute to the environment, because most of the work we do is protecting water bodies, protecting
Mhm.
soil erosion, and planting trees, and doing work which is also looks at environment. And
So,
this is being a kind of counter to the cash transfer idea from
mhm.
Brazil. We've had many discussions about cash transfer, how in India cash transfer will be a completely undemocratic mode, and we don't want that to happen, because we want people's decision making processes to be strengthened. So you really
Right.
have to have a space where you can talk about what you want and change from the grassroots. It's only then that you'll have a living democracy.
So, for the benefit of our audience who perhaps isn't familiar with it, so the MREGA is the Indian National Employment Guarantee Program. So every household in India is guaranteed 100 days of employment within 5 kilometers of their home, and subject to a minimum wage. And the labor is used to, as Professor Roy has pointed out, to shore up water bodies, to prevent soil erosion, to build canals, to build roads. All kinds of public infrastructure and public goods are being produced through this process. And so this is sort of like a counter to the idea of just giving everyone like a flat cash transfer. Instead, you give them employment for a certain number of days. The idea is that this is more dignified. Is that consistent with your understanding, Professor Roy?
Yes, and I think it's what Roosevelt's New Deal, actually, which did
Hmm.
this infrastructure building
Yeah.
when the Depression came. So these ideas are seeded across the world. The ideas that we don't exchange ideas. What we do exchange is the worst of us, which is money, and of course the whole issue of exploiting one or the other. But you must have a pooling of ideas, and that's where I think MKSS has really been working hard. We spent a lot of time in Africa, in South Africa and Kenya and other countries there, talking to people who are interested in similar things, because we come from a similar background and we have similar societies, and our societies face similar problems. So talking to them makes huge amounts of sense, instead of going and talking to people who have everything and whom we want money from. Actually, you go and talk to people who are in the same condition, and many things happen. And it's been amazing, because even with the right to information law, the South African law is such a wonderful law. And at one time, India's law was rated the second. But now there is a huge threat to the Indian law with
Mm.
the Data Protection Act.
Sorry,
Go and
Professor
send
Roy,
you
you're breaking.
documents, and if you all feel like, you can have a look at it. Yeah, sorry, you there now. So the Digital Act, we will send you an article, and also some small videos which you can, if you're interested, if you can show at some future time. But now, because I don't think we have time left, and that's a whole complete issue on its own.
Okay. So here's another question from the audience. As someone who has worked extensively on social audits and citizen participation, what do you
Can you
think
hear
is the
me?
most? Yes, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So the question from the
I
audience
can.
is,
Yeah,
as someone
yes,
who
I
has,
can. Yes, I can.
okay.
Yes, yes. Okay.
So as someone who has worked extensively on social audits and citizen participation, what do you think is the most effective way for governments to make policy making more participatory and accountable? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
So
Yeah.
how do you think, so I guess I'll, tie this in
Through
with a question of my own.
Am I audible? Should I
Yes,
switch?
you're breaking
Should I
up a
switch
little
my
bit.
internet
I think you're breaking up a little bit. Yeah,
to the
you
other
would
internet?
be.
Should I switch to the
That
other?
might be use beneficial. Yeah.
Can you hear me better now?
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
So actually, we argued and we wanted it called the pre-legislative process. There we came up against great deal of vested interest amongst the bureaucrats and some politicians, because they saw the RTI and they felt that all their impunity was being threatened, that they could not do what they wanted to do, and they had to answer questions, and so they wanted to resist anything. In the pre-legislative process, we said the first thing you must do is the intent or the principles of a law or a policy you want to frame should be in the public domain. And you must invite people from all over the country, not only to react and respond to what you say on the internet or on the what do you call this? Online, but you must actually bring those instruments to people, because we have 22 languages. So you just can't put it up in Hindi and English and say everybody understands. Nobody does. So you have regional meetings. You take this policy designed to people or the principles to people and discuss it. If they approve whatever suggestions they make, recommendations they make, they want changes, absorb them all and put whatever is your final draft back for us to see. And if then you invite comments, and then you invite constructive comments, you invite negative comments, you invite all comments. After that, you appoint a group of people who are not only government servants, but are people who are specialized in the process and a part of the community which will get affected by it, to sit down and finally decide what the law will be. And RTI was done like this, actually. So it's not impossible. Manrega was also done like that. So it was not as if they were impossible tasks for people, for government. But vested interest has really dug its heels in. And now today in India, we are not consulted about anything. We are not even on the periphery of lawmaking. We only face the consequences of the laws, but we are not part of any process at all now in India. And the world over, power is concentrating more and more in centralized domains, and people want no decentralization of power, no decentralization of decision making. The concept of a federation is a threat in India and in other countries as well. We want one single government sitting in one small part of a very large country to decide for everybody. And we have all kinds of battles. In the latest battle in India is, of course, the Digital Protection Act, but it's also the language issue. So now I think everybody has to read and write in Hindi. And many people have dug their heels and say they just simply won't. They'd rather secede from India than use Hindi. So this is the chaos that's come because the federation has ceased to be. And because of that, our lawmaking process has also undergone a severe threat from the government. And they see us, therefore, that's why they want to finish us off by calling us Nakshals or calling us Nakshals or calling us all those kinds of things, to put fear of God that whatever we might say will be an anti-government, but anti the state. But we argue that we are not anti the state. We believe in the Constitution of India. We believe in India as an entity. All that we are saying is that the government should not do this. And the government cannot abrogate to itself all the rights of the state. It's only there for 5 years. After that, it goes. The Constitution is there as a document forever. So you can't violate the Constitution and the constitutional norms. So those are discussions and arguments are still alive and ongoing. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things I appreciate about NKSS is its role in protesting, in pushing against government actions or pushing for government actions. So as someone who's been a part of a lot of these protests, what do you think makes for like an effective protest as opposed to maybe like a not that effective protest? What do you think is the key?
But there's no formula really, but I think there are certain principles which you can follow. Firstly, I think there must be work at the lowest possible levels where people are. They must understand. Again, it's gone off. Hello?
Can you hear me?
Did I go off? So
no. We can hear you.
Understand. Okay. People must understand. People who are to be affected by any condition should understand what it is. Then they will stay with you forever. But if you just go and talk to them, as most politicians do in most countries, and just give them a line, that doesn't work. They will stay, they contribute from their meager resources. They contribute money, little bits of money, but which are actually like billions of rupees, because of the if you take it as a sort of a percentage of what they have, it's enormous amounts of money to sustain the struggle. They come there, they sit there, and they understand that the personal is political. They understand that their demand is the demand authenticated and promoted by the Constitution of India. They realize that that right has to be seceded by the state or the government at some level. They also understand that there will be a problem because the tenaciousness of the state and if the use of strike by the state is enormous. So one has to sit it out. And we do it, we are non-violent protesters. We use Gandhiji's Satyagraha mode and Ambedkar's constitution as a kind of combined. So we do protest only non-violently. So the non-violent protest has its own problems. So therefore we do, but we also keep on, as I said, after the struggle, we have advocacy, and the advocacy means going and speaking to respective people in the government, whether it's a politician or a government servant, convincing them about how important this law is or how crucial it is to the well-being of your figures that you want to promote, of the law being, if anything, being implemented at the grassroots level. If you want any kind of veracity or ethics in your functioning, you need this kind of thing. Some of them contribute, or not all people are evil. So even in government which we struggle against, there are good people who probably want the same ends, but are incapable of coming out and protesting, who give space to at least to listen and to take things further. In the recent years, in the last 5 years in Rajasthan, till a year ago, we had a government that listened to us a lot more, and we had a real dialogue with the government over numbers of issues. And we got a dialogue with them going on pensions. So old age pension in Rajasthan is now a law. For the first time in India, there's a pension law. There is a health law for the first time in India. And there is, amazingly enough, a law which covers the new work relationship of the worker with the what do you call them? The aggregator. You don't have any
Arbitrator?
You don't have any bosses now. The aggregator is the person who aggregates your Amazon and your whatever it is, the people who deliver things at your doorstep. It's the Uber, it's the Ola. So the relationship of the worker to the aggregator is now like what it used to be to the big corporate body or the factory or whatever. So we decided that there should be a new law which should really look at it, and we called it the gig workers law. And that law, government has to provide a platform, and where the aggregator has to take the responsibility and the obligation to put a certain percentage of money, and they take a small amount from the worker, the driver, whoever it is, who's the aggregator, and that becomes a fund for health coverage, for insurance, for two very important things. Because if they die on the road, there's no one to cover them for health and for life. So for these things, we thought it would be very important. The Rajasthan government has passed it. 2 more governments are looking at the law to pass it. There is a lot of support from some of the political parties and none from many others. So, and the corporate body is extremely agitated because they don't want to spare that 1.01% of their profits with the worker, who is in such a dismal state now.
Yeah. So as a final question, and we'll try and keep this quick since we're almost out of time. So for students who are engaged in policy studies, who are engaged in government, what advice do you have for them in translating their knowledge into actual real world impact?
See, the first thing is the knowledge that we get is useful, but in a very limited way. For democratic action, you have to understand how it works out actually. So the first thing we must do is to work with the community, which is supposed to get the benefit of that particular idea, concept, law, whatever we are working with, and get them to articulate what it is that they want. None of these laws would have come about if the people had not articulated what they wanted. In village after village after village after village where I went, the 2 issues of corruption, 2 issues of discussion, corruption and no work. Unemployment and corruption were the dominant preoccupations. From that came two important laws, the Right to Information Law and the Manrega. So everybody thinks that it's been defined by a group of people. It has been defined by the community and the people. That's why even today, though the political party in power would like to kill these two acts, it's very nervous because touching it means touching millions of people who are benefiting from these laws. And what will be the result of that kind of denial of a right already enjoyed is too horrifying for them, even for them to imagine. So I would say go to the community, test your idea first with the community, and have humility, like I had to learn humility, to know that you can be wrong, that an idea can be wrong, that what we today call ideation by a very high-powered team may be the most hollow of things. So you have to go back to the people to get it mandated. Some of our ideas, of course, fantastic, but there are many other ideas which simply don't have, which people give you.
Yeah, thank you. I think be humble and listen to people is great advice. Thank you so much for this conversation. I've learned a lot, and you've given us a lot to think about. And thank you all for listening to us and for all the questions. So we are wrapping up now. Thank you to Shagun and Michael and Vartika for organizing this, and thank you, Professor Roy, for talking to us.
Thank you, everybody, and thanks for bridging this huge gap in distance, notwithstanding the small hiccups we had with our internet failing here. And thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you. Please be in touch.
Yes.